Hello. Welcome back to the Space Gulag, otherwise known as PPSW, your favorite hangout place, and today we're back with another Star Wars story. Today, in the waning hours of the Clone Wars, the Jedi Council promoted Anakin Skywalker to Council Member per request of the Chancellor. What would have happened had Anakin been granted the rank of Master instead of being blasted by Windu in front of the entire Council? Before we begin this video, special thanks to our patrons, voice actors, and everyone else part of the Pente Patrol team. If you want a chance to win in our next giveaway, watch the end of the video and I'll tell you all about it. Our story begins at the top of the main tower of the Jedi Temple. The last 24 hours had been off the charts. Anakin Skywalker divided up the entirety of his division, the 501st, and given his former apprentice, Ahsoka Tano, lead of half of the army with the now Commander Rex, while he took Commander Appa to Coruscant. Apprentice Ahsoka and Rex went to Mandalore, breaking hundreds of years' worth of treaties between the Republic and Mandalore. The dispute began when the Death Watch helped oversee the downfall of the ruler, Duchess Satine, and then the ever-so-repugnant Bo-Katan reached out to Ahsoka to help dissolve and resolve something she created. On the other hand, Skywalker and Kenobi were dispatched back to Coruscant. The capital of the Republic was under assault, and they had to save the Chancellor of the Republic from the Invisible Hand. He was captured by General Grievous on Coruscant. One of the Separatist leaders by the name of Count Dooku was also killed by Anakin Skywalker over Coruscant. While this daring rescue was commendable, the Force felt more out of balance than it had ever before. The Jedi were trying to maintain the peace, but the war was coming to an end. The Council was splitting off across the galaxy, and inside of the Council chambers, they were about to discuss what would happen and who would go where. But first, they had to announce the promotion of young Skywalker to Council Member. Instead of making a ceremony out of Anakin's promotion, Mace Windu made a point to strategically tell Anakin that he was not a master on the Council. Anakin's heart sank into the floor as he spoke up. Mace anticipated this. He knew how crushed Anakin was over Ahsoka leaving the Order, but the truth was that Anakin wanted access to the restricted section. The Jedi Council had given him permission as a Jedi Master on the High Council, but he wasn't a Jedi Master. Most of the Order addressed him as Master because if it hadn't been for the setup by Barriss Offee, then Ahsoka would have become a Knight by this point, and Anakin would have been a Jedi Master. Regardless, Mace Windu allowed Anakin to have his little temper tantrum as he told young Skywalker to take a seat. The Council had a plan. They knew that Anakin would mouth off to Chancellor Palpatine about this. If Palpatine was in fact the Sith Lord, he would take the bait. The Jedi then all began discussing where everyone would go. Yoda would take care of the droid attack on the Wookiees on Kashyyyk. Ki-Adi-Mundi would be sent to Megiddo to lead the Galactic Marines against the mining operation the Separatists controlled, while Master Plo Koon would go to Cato Neimoidia to take on the final piece of resistance of one of the Separatist capital planets. Depa Billaba would take her apprentice Caleb Dume to Kalar to lead her clones on a siege, while General Kenobi would take the 212th and 7th Sky Corps to Utapau to find and kill General Grievous. The Clone Wars looked closer than ever to being ended, and peace could be restored to the galaxy finally. Anakin sat in his seat quietly. He was so embarrassed. He was called out in front of the entire Jedi Council, and they silently sat there and watched it happen to him. After the meeting, Anakin expressed how upset he was with the Council to Kenobi. Obi-Wan understood why Anakin was upset, but he was the youngest member the Council ever had. While Windu was the youngest Master on the Council, Anakin was the youngest member of the Order ever allowed to serve on the Jedi Council. Obi-Wan knew that Anakin wouldn't handle this task well, but the Council wanted Anakin to spy on the Chancellor. It wasn't what Obi-Wan wanted, especially since he wouldn't be staying on world to help Anakin during this time. Anakin wasn't thrilled with the idea of spying on the Chancellor either. Palpatine was a mentor of sorts, and even more than that, a good friend to him. Obi-Wan of course understood why Anakin was upset, but he continued trying to comfort Anakin, trying to explain to him that the Republic was at war, and the war was so close to being ended that anyone and everyone needed to be watched. Anakin of course was still emotionally upset about these occurrences, and he felt betrayed. Anakin over the course of the next few days would undergo several challenges, especially emotional challenges. He had dreams about his wife dying during childbirth, which he had only recently found out about her being pregnant. He was brought onto the Council, but not given the rank of Master. He was told to spy on a mentor, while his best friend and teacher had to leave the planet, after giving him the slightest amount of joy and hope since becoming a Council member. And, on top of that, his former apprentice was currently gone. She was on Mandalore, and he hadn't heard from her since she left before the Battle of Coruscant. And the night before Anakin had an experience with Palpatine. He was at a large bubble show with Palpatine as they had a deep conversation. It made Anakin question his loyalties, but it also made him question what power Palpatine had. He knew of the Sith. How could any ordinary man just learn about the Sith? Regardless of that, Anakin was sent to the Chancellor's office, and he was going there to currently discuss that Obi-Wan Kenobi had engaged General Grievous on Utapau. Anakin was certainly worried for his former master. He should have been there with Kenobi, but he wasn't, and that made him distraught as ever. All Anakin wanted to do was help his former master, but regardless, he was sent to the Chancellor's office. When Anakin arrived, he began speaking to the Chancellor. Anakin told Chancellor Palpatine that Obi-Wan had engaged General Grievous. While this was good news, Anakin expressed that he was upset because he wasn't able to be with Obi-Wan on this invasion. This was a pivotal moment in the Clone Wars, and Anakin wanted to be there for him. Palpatine dug deeper and made Anakin feel uneasy as ever as he expressed that the Jedi clearly didn't trust him. Anakin was very uneasy, and then Palpatine seized everything he could as he pushed further and further as the two walked into a small corridor between Palpatine's two offices. He told Anakin that he knew the ways of the Force. Anakin was obviously jarred by this as he turned around with surprise written across his face as Palpatine said that Anakin needed to join him or his wife would die in certain death. Anakin ignited his lightsaber as he held the blade at Palpatine. The Sith Lord felt all the anger seething from Anakin as he waited for Anakin to decide if he would kill him or let him live. Anakin gritted his teeth as he told Palpatine that he would turn him over to the Jedi Council. Palpatine grinned. This is exactly what he wanted. He would have the Jedi where he needed them, and Anakin would swoop in to save him. Anakin would quickly return to the Jedi Temple, running far and wide looking for Windu and any other council members that were still on world. Agon Kolar, Saesee Tiin, or Kit Fisto being some of those council members. They were all around here somewhere, he just needed to find them. And then, when he found all four of them together, they looked ready to make a change. Their faces all had focus written across them, as Windu saw Anakin come around the corner into the hangar bay. Anakin told Windu that Palpatine was the Sith Lord. Windu was shocked, but then he smiled. He placed his hand on Anakin's shoulder, asking if Anakin was sure. Anakin was positive. Windu thanked Anakin by calling him Master Skywalker. Anakin stepped back. He asked if he was a Jedi Master. Windu confirmed that Anakin was now a Jedi Master on the High Council. Anakin was confused, as Mace explained to Anakin that the Council suspected that Palpatine being the Sith Lord, and they assumed that because of the bond between the two of them, that Palpatine would try and take advantage of this moment for Anakin. Windu told Anakin that he was very proud of him. He handled everything incredibly well, all things considered. Anakin took a deep breath, his heart filled with joy, as the other three Masters walked over and congratulated young Skywalker on being the youngest Jedi Master on the Council. Anakin then asked how this was at all possible. Windu explained that because Ahsoka would have been brought back into the Order as a Jedi Knight, that technically meant that Anakin was a Jedi Master, not to mention that most of the Jedi recognized him as a Jedi Master anyways. Windu told Anakin to wait in the Council chambers until they returned. Anakin then spoke up, asking if he could go to the archives instead. Windu thought for a moment, and then he smiled. He pulled a chip out of his pocket. It was a code to get into the restricted section of the archives. Windu told Anakin that it was perfectly fine with him. Mace was impressed that Anakin was so eager to learn, even after this extremely stressful situation. Windu told Anakin once more that he was proud of him, before telling him that they would be back momentarily, but asking strictly that Anakin stay in the temple until they returned. Anakin nodded his head as he held back tears, with the greatest smile on his face. Windu patted Anakin's shoulder and then turned around and walked with his posse to a nearby gunship. Anakin walked to the door at the edge of the hangar bay before turning around and watching the gunship fly out of the hangar bay. Anakin immediately turned around quickly and walked through the temple as people nodded, bowed, and addressed him as Master Skywalker. Anakin smiled slightly as he continued his way through the Jedi Temple. Anakin got into the archives as he searched for Jocasta Nu. He then heard an older voice address him by Master Skywalker as he turned around. It was, in fact, Jocasta Nu. She was asking what he wanted or what he was searching for. Anakin pulled a little chip out of his belt and showed it to her. She smiled and then laughed, as she guided Anakin to the restricted section of the archives. Jocasta Nu explained to Anakin how the contraption worked, guiding him and teaching him how to use the Force to open up the panel. She did it, and then she closed the door and asked Anakin to do it. On the first try he failed. Jocasta Nu chuckled. She told Anakin that it was normal. It was an intricate combination, and it took a lot of patience. She placed her hand on Anakin's shoulder and told him to concentrate. Jocasta Nu's presence was calming as Anakin concentrated, and with patience, the door opened up. Jocasta smiled as she told Anakin that he did it well too. She then asked Anakin if he would like a tour inside of the restricted section. Anakin paused for a moment, and then nodded his head. It might be easier if she taught him everything inside of the restricted section, instead of him just searching around aimlessly. Jocasta Nu had been the archivist for several decades, and she had everything inside of the Jedi archives exactly where she wanted it. It was her system, and there wasn't a single holocron that she didn't know where it was. She guided Anakin into a corridor as the massive doors behind her closed. Jocasta then explained that the second panel inside of the restricted section was the inverse of the first combination. Simple to remember, difficult to do. Anakin concentrated on it, and on the first try, the Chosen One was able to open the lock. Jocasta grinned, surprised he got it first try. Not even Master Windu or Shaak Ti got it on their first try. Regardless, the two of them entered the restricted section. Jocasta had organized the entirety of the archives, but the restricted section was the prize of her work as an archivist. Jocasta Nu took Anakin around showing him holobooks, holocrons, and data cards. There were thousands of years worth of information inside of this vault. Jocasta led Anakin to a bookshelf, and she told Anakin that this shelf had holocrons from the Old Republic all the way through the High Republic eras. Everything here was rare Force abilities attained by Jedi Masters. Anakin asked what the most recent addition to this collection was, as Jocasta immediately responded saying that a few decades prior, Jedi Master Plo Koon used what he called electric judgment, and it was the most recent addition to this collection. Jocasta Nu continued around to another bookshelf of holocrons, as she told Anakin that these were abilities that the Order and the Code restricted, though they were still accessible in times of emergency by the Council. It would be deemed by them and them alone if they could go into the vault and use one of those abilities. Jocasta then said that Vapad, the lightsaber style that Mace Windu used, was a part of this, because it hindered on the dark side and the light side of the Force, but Mace was still allowed to use it. Anakin saw a bit of hypocrisy in this, but he continued on, as Jocasta Nu showed him a shelf that held all the information known about the Sith, all of their data and even their abilities. She explained that every Sith Lord from Nihilus to Revan was present here. Anakin hadn't heard these names, as Jocasta smiled, telling him that there was no reason to worry about this information. It was all information the Jedi kept so that they could put an end to a planet-eating warrior or Sith acolyte without having to watch an entire order crumble beneath their feet. Jocasta then brought Anakin around as he looked at another shelf. She explained that this one held information of the future. Anakin was confused. Jocasta explained that everything inside of the shelf had to do with key locations and peoples of the future. One of the holocrons on the shelf contained a list of every Force-sensitive child in the galaxy. And finally, there was a shelf that Jocasta Nu collected and displayed herself. It was a collection of all the basic Jedi teachings, so that if the Order was to fall, only a Jedi Master would be able to access these teachings and show their students in the way of the Jedi. It was a collection of data that would ensure the Jedi would survive if their Order fell like it did in the times of the Old Republic. There was also a list of every former Jedi temple, academy, or ancient grounds that they used to own. Anakin thanked Jocasta Nu for informing him of all of what he needed to know, as she nodded and walked out of the restricted section, telling Anakin to get a hold of her if he needed any help. The second the doors closed behind her, Anakin ran over to one of the shelves, as he looked for holocrons on immortality. There was so much information, and he had to be quick. He could feel the darkness in the galaxy, and the light rising to meet it. Anakin searched long and hard as he went around the massive shelves that were shaped like cubes, filled to the brim with information. After several hours of the shelf he was currently on, the shelf of the Sith, Anakin moved over to the shelf of restricted Jedi abilities. Anakin thought it would be weird that he didn't find anything in the Sith information about immortality, especially after what Palpatine had just recently told him, and then he realized it was all a trick. Palpatine was setting him up to betray the Jedi. Anakin fell to his knees. Everything was just a trick to betray the Jedi and everyone he loved. The Sith didn't know anything. They just knew the art of manipulation. Anakin's rage boiled inside of him, as his blood rattled through his veins and his eyes shot with blood-piercing rage. He wanted to kill Palpatine for manipulating him for so long. Anakin didn't know how to connect the dots sooner, but Palpatine was a Sith Lord who tried to have Padme killed by ordering Dooku to try and assassinate her 3 years prior on the landing bay platform. Every single time Anakin was about to face the most difficult battle he would have seen throughout the duration of the Clone Wars, he was pulled away from combat, Umbara being especially poignant on the mind. Then he also remembered Fives being killed by Commander Fox, the one clone specifically loyal to the Chancellor himself. Everything ever since the words he said to him on Naboo, about watching his career with great interest. Anakin was groomed by a monster. Tears rang out of his eyes as he realized the Jedi truly did have his best intentions in their mind. Between Yoda having given him Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan's compassion not just as a master but as a friend, always keeping the secret between him and Padme so that Anakin could rejoice in happiness with her. Anakin was extremely emotional because of the whole situation regarding Padme, so instead of going to the Senate building, he left the archives and made his way to her residence. He knew he told Windu he would stay in the archives, but he figured that if Padme was once a target, then she would be a great target for Palpatine to take down again, to bring Anakin to the depths of the dark side. Anakin thanked Jocasta Nu as he told her he would be back soon, as she smiled and moved over to wake up Master Sunube, who was currently taking a nap inside of the main archives once again. Anakin made it to Padme's residence while the lights were off, but she was somewhere in here. Anakin was extremely worried. The dark side of the Force was still strong. Was it possible that Sidious killed all 4 Jedi Masters? As Anakin rounded the corner, he wrapped his arms around Padme as she asked what was wrong. She was happy to see Anakin and embraced him as well. Anakin said he was just happy to see her and explained everything that was happening, telling her that Palpatine was the Sith Lord that they were looking for. The two of them sat on the couch as across the city, Windu held Palpatine to the ground with his purple lightsaber. Sidious was a fine duelist, but Windu was able to use Shatterpoint and Vapad against him, pulling all of the dark side energy away from Sidious as he used his own power against the Dark Lord to beat him in lightsaber combat. Sidious was hoping that Anakin would come to rescue him, but the hallway was empty. Sidious used his fingers and shot lightning at the Jedi Master of the Order, as he blocked the lightning back down at Sidious, before he pushed the lightning into the Dark Lord as he drove his purple blade into Sidious's chest, extinguishing the final Sith Lord. Windu sighed as he fell back, leaning on the Chancellor's desk. He couldn't believe what had just happened. He sat alone. There was no one else who knew of this, so he got into contact with Skywalker immediately, and requested that he come to the Senate chambers and meet him in Palpatine's office. Anakin stood up and nodded, as he told Padme that he would be back. It seemed that the Clone Wars were closer than ever to being ended. There was a light of positivity in the air. General Grievous had just been defeated by Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the Outer Rim sieges were going as planned. The Separatist leaders were all being relocated to Mustafar, but little did they know how lost they would become. Anakin would eventually arrive in the office of the Chancellor to see Windu looking puzzled as ever. This mess needed to be cleaned up, and the Senate needed to be made aware of Palpatine's plot to destroy the Republic. Anakin then noticed something. He pointed over to some statues leading to a smaller room where the bodies of Kit Fisto, CC-10, and Agan Kolar remained. Anakin recognized the statues. They were ancient relics of the Sith. They were essentially power boosters to Sidious's power. It helped him stay concealed from the Jedi until the very end. Anakin asked Windu if he was alright. He nodded. The other 3 Jedi were his squad, and they were not alright. They were his best friends, and they all died in front of his eyes. It was okay though. Mace was more focused on cleaning up this mess. Anakin asked what they could do to conceal the truth from the Republic. Mace told Anakin that the truth would be what helps the Jedi Order here. It gives an excuse for why the Jedi became so involved in politics, and why they became generals in the Clone Wars. While there was a lot that had to be decided about what would become for the Jedi for the assassination of the Chancellor, there was one more saving grace, and that was Ahsoka and Maul returning from Mandalore. Until then, Mace contacted Sindralic to bring 4 temple guards and station them outside the Chancellor's office to ensure that no one came into the death scene. Over the course of the next few hours, the Jedi cruiser carrying Ahsoka and the 322nd arrived on Coruscant as they brought Darth Maul into the Jedi Temple. Mace instructed Anakin to stay with Sindralic. It was well known that Anakin and the Chancellor were close, and if Anakin stayed at the scene of Palpatine's death, it was unlikely that Tarkin, Masameda, or anyone else would try and get past the Jedi security. At the same time, Mace waited on the steps of the Jedi Temple, as Maul, guided by Ahsoka and Rex, walked up to Windu. Maul was still inside of the Mandalorian Force prison. He couldn't do anything, as Windu asked one question. He asked what Maul knew of this Lord Sidious. Maul smiled under the contraption as Windu unlocked the mouthpiece and ignited his amethyst blade and raised it, telling Maul to choose his words wisely. Maul looked over at Ahsoka. She looked at Maul and then back to see Mace Windu, as Windu asked why he was looking at her. Ahsoka said that Maul had told her about Sidious and his plan to turn Anakin into a bringer of chaos. While it wasn't obvious what else Sidious had been doing, the Clone Wars was obviously orchestrated by him. Windu sheathed his lightsaber and told Maul that this was what he needed to hear, and locked him back up inside the prison as he asked ARC Trooper Jesse and Commander Rex to take Maul inside the Jedi Temple. And then, Windu dismissed Ahsoka, thanking her for her work as a citizen. Ahsoka spoke up, asking where Anakin was. Windu told her that he was on a special mission, before turning around and walking with Jesse and the few other clones inside the Jedi Temple. Maul got incredibly odd looks from everyone inside of the temple. He was the first Sith seen by any one of them in any of their lives. On the other side of the city, Sindralic called upon more of his temple guards, asking that they remove the body, limbs, and sabers of Agen Kolar, Saesee Tiin, and Kit Fisto. At the same time, the body of Palpatine would be removed, and it would be taken back to the Jedi Temple, where the Jedi would keep it locked away, assuring that both Maul and Palpatine never had a chance at coming back. After all the bodies were removed, the Temple Guards removed the Sith relics, and took them to the archives where Jocasta Nu would investigate them. And finally, a cleanup crew would come in and replace the broken glass and repair the holes in the wall, created by the duel. Within several hours, it looked as if nothing had happened here. Anakin and Sindralic would dismiss the Temple Guards, as the two of them quietly discussed the events of the night before. The Senate, on the other hand, would be informed by Mace Windu and Senator Amidala of the death of Palpatine, before then revealing that he was the Sith Lord behind everything, including the invasion of Naboo, almost 13 years ago. The Senate would erupt in chaos. It was impossible that the Chancellor could be behind all of it, but if it was true, it was revealed and then backed up by Maul and Ahsoka, revealing that Sidious had a sinister plot to overthrow the Republic, use his power to become the ultimate ruler in the galaxy. And then finally, Jocasta Nu would enter the Senate chambers and discuss what the Chancellor had in his office, all of which being Sith relics. This was not enough evidence for the Senate, as they called upon the only Jedi that was close to the Chancellor. Admiral Tarkin wanted to be a part of this trial, but because it wasn't militaristic, he had no chance to be a part of it. Instead, he watched as Anakin took the stand. He told the Senate that he was essentially groomed by the Chancellor, and at a moment of weakness, Sidious tried to manipulate him into betraying the Jedi. Mace Windu then spoke after Anakin, telling the Galactic Senate that the Jedi Order got close to the politics of the galaxy because they felt that it was under the control of the Sith. They joined the war effort to ensure that the Republic did not fall. Now that the ancient rival of the Jedi was dead, they were removing themselves from the political atmosphere of the galaxy. While most of this was false, Mace wanted the public to see that the Jedi were being servants to the galaxy, not a political ideology. The public had a lot of distrust and disliking for the Jedi. Many people were even blaming them for the war effort, but the war was coming to an end. Dooku was dead, Grievous destroyed, the Outer Rim sieges won, and the Chancellor dead. It was unknown what would happen next. The next few months would be full of tension, mostly between the Senate and the Jedi. The Clone Wars were still going on, because the Separatist leaders were still out and about, but because Palpatine intended on ending the Clone Wars, the Separatists were down in leadership, with the death of most of its prominent military leaders within the span of a couple months. There was really nothing that they could do to stop the Grand Army of the Republic from stomping them to a pulp. While Poggle the Lesser and the rest of the Separatist leaders had the resources to win, they certainly didn't have the tactical superiority to pull off a victory. The Senate and Jedi continued disputing as interim Chancellor Bail Organa rose to power. As for Padme Amidala, she took a momentary leave of absence to have her two twins on Naboo. Just as she suggested to Anakin she would raise their children on Naboo. And, while Anakin would never tell the Council about this, he served as a master on the High Council. He would take trips to Naboo periodically to help raise the kids, but he was also to enlist Ahsoka as an auntie of sorts. Ahsoka, who had nowhere to go after Mandalore, would be taken to Naboo with Padme and Anakin to help raise their children. She was given a place to stay, and she was able to meditate on the Force too. Obi-Wan was incredibly proud of Anakin. He felt incredibly bad for not being around and being there for Anakin during one of his most trying times. But it showed Obi-Wan that his faith in Anakin was always rightly placed. The Council also looked to adding more members to the High Council in the absence of Saesee Tiin, Agen Kolar, and Kit Fisto. In their place, the Council would leave it empty though. There were several quantifiable candidates, but they didn't feel the need to fill the ranks because those three masters were heroes for bringing an end to the Sith. Months turned into 4 years as Anakin stayed his term on the Council, and then decided that he would keep his seat on the Council as a lifetime seat. By this time, there were now 3 new members on the High Council. Luke and Leia were exceptional children, having been raised by Padme, Anakin, and Ahsoka. The children were happy growing up together. They loved their parents and their auntie Tano too. While the Republic was finally in peace, the Clone Army had been disbanded, with every single member of the Grand Army of the Republic being taken care of by benefits. The clones were able to go out and live in the galaxy, free from service. Of course, there were still those who served, to fight little pockets against separatist rebels. The entire Grand Army of the Republic was also to remove their inhibitor chips, and they were able to live freely without their coding. The Jedi, as Windu said, removed themselves from the Senate and became less political as they carried out being peacekeepers in the galaxy. Though for Master Yoda he was continuing down the line of training he was being taught by Qui-Gon since the end of the Clone Wars. It was ever so apparent that there was still something unresolved in the Force. While most of the Council felt it, none of them could pinpoint it. They didn't know where this darkness was coming from, but for Anakin it felt personal. He had found balance within himself, becoming a master to many and even teaching classes of younglings. Anakin had yet taken another apprentice in fear of what happened to Ahsoka, so he stayed out of teaching, personally. He became especially close to other Jedi Council members. Anakin truly appreciated being a part of the High Council, and respected every Council member. Anakin even matured while being a member of the High Council. He was able to study with Jocasta Nu, and uncover more secrets of the Jedi past. There was so much knowledge he could intake, and it was especially great for him because he was the Chosen One, the sole being in the galaxy powerful enough to wield these powers. There was very little in the galaxy that could stop him. Though one night, while sleeping in his room, he woke to a terrible nightmare. It was Luke and Leia. They were actually the son and daughter, but not of his. It was a terrible, terrible place. Somewhere that Anakin thought he'd forgotten, but he hadn't truly forgotten Mortis. Anakin had sweat dripping off of him as he ran through the halls of the Jedi Temple. He wasn't wearing more than a simple robe. As he ran to Obi-Wan's room and barged in, Obi-Wan jolted from his sleep and rubbed his eyes, asking Anakin what was wrong. Anakin expressed that he had a nightmare about the son and daughter. Obi-Wan remembered Mortis as well, but he asked what it had to do with his dream. Anakin stopped. Obi-Wan didn't know about the twins. He knew Anakin was a father, but of twins, he had no clue that there were two of them. Assuming that there was only a son, or only a daughter, Kenobi told Anakin that dreams come and go. He thought for a moment. He knew that Anakin couldn't go and talk to Yoda about this. He said that maybe Anakin should meditate on it, connect himself to the Force, telling Anakin to remember the balance he found after his nightmares of Padme. Anakin nodded his head and thanked Obi-Wan as he walked back to his room. When he got back, he saw his comlink blinking. It wasn't a normal communication device, it was the device specifically for calls from Padme. His heart rate jumped into the air as he ran over and turned it on. It was his wife. She was on Naboo with Ahsoka. She had a bruise on her forehead, and she seemed really confused. But she said that the children were missing. She had just regained consciousness, and she didn't know where Ahsoka was. Anakin's heart stopped. As he ran back out of the room with the comlink still on, he ran towards the hangar bay and got a hold of R2, telling his little astromech to prepare the ship. They didn't have any time to waste. Within minutes, he was in the hangar bay, pulling out and setting up one of the hundreds of hyperspace rings before jumping into hyperspace. Anakin rested his head on his hands as he worried endlessly. The nightmare, it terrified him. His children, Padme, they were the light of his life, and he couldn't bear to let anything happen to them as he sat in hyperspace focusing. Remembering what Obi-Wan taught him, trust in the Force, Anakin focused on the Force for the few hours it took for him to get to Naboo. When he arrived, he whipped his starfighter out of hyperspace and flew it down to Naboo's surface. As he whipped it out of the hyperspace ring, he pulled it down to the surface at extreme speeds. R2 whistled, as Anakin had never flown this fast before. The ship from the inside could be felt rupturing, but nothing would stop Anakin from saving his children. When he arrived, he saw a small fire billowing out of the house. He jumped up from his starfighter and ran to the steps as he saw a struggle. Cuts into the ancient walls as the wind blew, as it tipped Anakin's robe open and his hair bounced on his neck. Anakin's eyes creased. He saw a lightsaber, and then a leg. When he rounded the corner, he saw the leg outstretched of his former apprentice. Anakin ran over and checked on her, but it was obvious. Ahsoka had been killed. Ahsoka's eyes swelled with tears as he looked around for Padme. She stumbled out of Leia's room. As Anakin ran over to her and embraced her, tears falling down his eyes, he turned around and saw that Leia was gone. In the adjacent room, Luke was also gone. Anakin cried out with a monstrous no. He turned around and picked up Ahsoka, begging her to come back. Anakin had no clue where his children were. They were gone, though, taken by the remnant of evil in this galaxy. Anakin didn't know why Mortis connected to this, but he knew that the only way this could be resolved is if he told the Council. They wouldn't appreciate it, but maybe if he told them, they could help him. Anakin's thoughts were astray. The only other person that was on Mortis with him was dead. Obi-Wan had no thoughts for Anakin on Coruscant, but this might change things. Anakin's heart was in a panic. He didn't know what to do. He figured he might take Padme back to Coruscant to ensure her safety from whatever this was. Anakin ran around the corner to put out the fire, while he began searching for something, anything that could lead him to whatever did this, whoever did this. Then a voice rang out from over his shoulders. It was so familiar. The voice was that of Qui-Gon Jinn. The voice told Anakin to bring Master Yoda to Naboo. He would guide him. Anakin spoke out, asking what would happen if Yoda found out. The voice responded, telling Anakin that Yoda already knew, just as well as Obi-Wan did, but Yoda also knew, as much as Obi-Wan knew, that Anakin's happiness could not be inhibited. Anakin needed Padme, and both Yoda and Anakin knew. While they didn't know the other one of them knew, they did know that Anakin fell in love. Yoda knew the moment he saved Anakin and Obi-Wan from Dooku on Geonosis 7 years before. Anakin's eyes widened, as he knew he had to get help from the Grand Master himself. Anakin called the Grand Master's frequency, and requested that he and Obi-Wan come to Naboo, to exact coordinates as soon as they could. Anakin was internally stressing. He then stopped and fell to his knees. Tears crumbled down his cheeks. All the memories he'd gathered from the past 7 years tumbled out of his soul. He thought of Ahsoka and him on Christophsis, saving the entire Republic effort despite the Separatists' best efforts to stop them. Ahsoka and his adventurous lessons, and the good and the bad. Ahsoka was his best friend, his student, someone as close to him as a sister as he would have ever had, and she was gone. Anakin's eyes welled as his cheeks lit with pain. He thought of all the memories he had of Luke and Leia. The children were never not smiling. They had everything, a mother, a father, an aunt of sorts. They never had to face slavery. They never had a code. They were free, and every ounce of their lives were free. Anakin's eyes showered as he thought of Luke's first steps, and then Leia's, or maybe it was the other way around. He thought of Luke and Leia first speaking to their father, and then their incredible prowess as Force users. Their joy was contagious, and Anakin felt he lost all of what he'd spent his entire life looking for. Anakin knelt where he was when he had nightmares of his mother. Padme wrapped her arms around him as he felt weak. Anakin was always feeling powerful, always put together, unbroken, but this was the lowest he had ever been. Everything was taken from him. Everything he'd worked so hard to build. Though within hours, Yoda and Obi-Wan would walk in. Obi-Wan ran in to find Anakin, as he found him and Padme huddled together on the patio, looking into the humble sunrise. Yoda frowned as he looked down at the fallen apprentice, cold to the touch. Yoda bit his lip as he remembered the vision he had on Dagobah. Ahsoka died in the temple, but this was no temple. Obi-Wan, in the other side of the house, wrapped his arms around Anakin and Padme, and apologized over and over again, promising to help them find their child. To help them find what it was that took their child and Ahsoka from them. Yoda walked around the corner as he said Anakin's last name. Anakin looked over. He was broken. He wore it on his face. There was nothing but pain drawn across the lines in his frown, and the scars of tears tracing down his eyes. Padme wore the bruise of pain overshadowing her head, as Yoda told Anakin that they needed to go. Yoda knew of Anakin's dream before this happened. Anakin was extremely prone to having dreams or foresight into what the future held, so Yoda requested that Padme go to the Jedi Temple. Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Anakin would be taking a trip elsewhere in the galaxy. The three Jedi would go to Dagobah, and then Anakin heard circuits. He walked over and saw C-3PO destroyed, his circuit sticking out of his body, as his hollow head was left dead on the ground in the middle of the living room, no lights shining out of his eyes. Anakin clenched his fist and gritted his teeth. He felt rage for the first time since the Clone Wars ended. He felt anger, pain, suffering, and Yoda could tell that Anakin was as close as he ever was to falling in the darkness. But Anakin turned around. He followed Yoda and Obi-Wan as Padme was escorted off-world. Quinlan Voss then walked into the house. He was there to see what had come through and taken the children. Yoda, Obi-Wan, Padme, and Anakin looked at Quinlan as he touched a piece of broken glass on the ground. It was from a vase that Anakin got Padme. It had their initials on it, with the rudimentary design of their family under the initials. Quinlan saw something he couldn't describe, a shadow that crept like a ghost. It had power unseen by anyone before. It could summon a blade with the Force, and it had the power not even Yoda had. Quinlan shivered as he felt its dark presence crawl through his veins, just as it had done to Ahsoka. It killed Ahsoka, slowly, painfully, and it was looking for revenge, because it was a cloud not of the Sith, but of something more. It was true power of the Force, and it used the Force as its ally to ensure that no one could take that revenge away from it. Quinlan's eyes were left in shock as he turned around and looked into Anakin, Obi-Wan, Padme, and Yoda's eyes. He shook. His breath was unsteady. He told them that he would continue trying to search through the dark cloud. Quinlan hadn't ever felt such darkness, not when he was even an agent of Dooku, an agent of evil. The dark side of the Force was vile, but not even this vile. The three Jedi departed as they moved themselves to Dagobah, with Master Yoda guiding them. This was more than good or evil. This was something else. Even Qui-Gon knew this as the three Jedi, after consecutive hours in hyperspace, landed on the swampy planet. Across the galaxy, Quinlan would eventually escort Padme inside of the Jedi Temple, after not finding anything else relating to that of this creature that tore through the Skywalker home. Yoda didn't say a word to Anakin regarding his family. It wasn't his business. Anakin was the best he'd ever been since he had a family. He was happy, balanced, and unstoppable within the light side of the Force. So why stop it? Why ruin it? When the trio landed on Dagobah, Yoda slowly took Anakin and Obi-Wan into a cave. He had been there 4 years before, at the end of the Clone Wars. Qui-Gon led him here, and now he was leading these two here, so that Anakin could go down and find what it was he was looking for. He walked down and he found himself surrounded by an evil power, something so cruel and dissident. Anakin looked over and he saw his son, red markings down his face, and then to his left he saw his daughter, pure white light radiating off of her, as he felt himself within control of the balance. But before him, he saw a cloud. Anakin cried out, demanding for them to reveal themselves, and then it told Anakin that revenge would be hers. A large grip wrapped itself around Anakin's neck as he felt the Force surge through his heart. He felt his heart stop. Then he awoke from a quick moment without life as he looked at the grinning teeth of the most cruel being alive in the universe, and there was nothing that would be able to stop her. Anakin was thrown back when he saw a massive structure behind her. Anakin couldn't breathe as he searched for his breath in the chaos of what had just happened. He climbed out of the cave, over lizards, snakes, and other beings as he grabbed at his throat, and then he felt freed. He looked up as Master Yoda and Obi-Wan as they both looked at him puzzled over what had just happened to him. He told Obi-Wan and Yoda that they had to go somewhere Obi-Wan and he had been before. It was a place where they encountered Qui-Gon for the first time since his death on Naboo. Anakin's skin crawled as his blood boiled over the name of the planet rang out of his mouth. Mortis. Yoda stepped back as Obi-Wan's eyes widened. He couldn't believe he had to do this again. He didn't want to, but he would do it for Anakin. For Yoda, he hadn't been there, but he remembered what Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan told him about their experience on the planet of the Ones. Though this creature, she was not one of the Ones, because all of the Ones were killed when they were last on Mortis. Obi-Wan rubbed his beard and asked blatantly, how could they even get to Mortis? They didn't even find it. The Father brought them there. How could they locate the planet without? Anakin spoke up. He told Obi-Wan that they would have to trust him to do it. If he was truly the Chosen One, truly meant to bring balance to the Force, then he would be able to find Mortis. Yoda nodded and agreed that the only way to do this would be through Anakin trusting his abilities within the Force. The three loaded up their shuttle as Anakin took the ship into hyperspace. Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Yoda would become entirely reliant on the Force as they began a fasting period. Their time inside the shuttle was prolonged as they spent every waking moment inside of the shuttle for months. Anakin tested himself in the Force as he tried his hardest to find the planet he desired finding. As the time prolonged, he got closer and closer, as the added help from Yoda and Kenobi eventually led them to a massive diamond in the middle of space, a hulking planet that stared back at them blankly. Anakin reached out with a force as the structure opened, and he piloted the ship into it. The planet of Mortis was mostly dead, shrouded in darkness. There was still the main temple, the temple where the Ones died. It belonged to the Sun. Anakin could feel the presence. She was powerful. Obi-Wan and Yoda felt it too, but it made them dizzy. She was all-powerful, untouchable. When the ship landed, Obi-Wan and Yoda followed Anakin out of the shuttle to see the towering castle before them. Anakin walked up the steps, the Force becoming blindingly powerful as it surrounded Anakin, Yoda, and Obi-Wan. Anakin could shield himself, but Obi-Wan and Yoda became weakened by such darkness, by such power. When they entered the throne room, there was nothing, no one. The glass above the throne was still shattered from the fight between the son and the daughter. The fight that tore the family apart. Father, son, daughter, they all died, as Anakin rounded the corner and looked into the piercing holes that were the eyes of the mother. She wasn't here before. She had been imprisoned by the son and the daughter, and abandoned by the father. But Mother was caring and loving. She was just like Father. He kept the balance between the two children, but unlike the Ones, she was just immortal. When she drank from the fountain of power and bathed in the pool of knowledge, she became something worse. She became something evil. She became like the Ones, but instead of being a representation of something more than herself, she became the bringer of chaos, otherwise known as a bone-chilling name, Abeloth. She smiled when she saw Anakin, both Luke and Leia in her lap, as she patted their heads and looked at Anakin as he stood before her. Anakin asked her what she wanted, and she wanted only one thing: revenge. Anakin questioned her and demanded to know what for. When she told him that he killed her entire family, the father, son, and daughter. They were her family, and Anakin murdered them. Anakin then demanded that she release the children, as Abeloth twisted her crooked hands around Luke and Leia's necks, and told Anakin to listen to her, or they would die by her hands in front of him. Anakin put his hands up as she smiled at him. He had no power here. He was the only living being in the galaxy that could challenge her, and yet she held all the power in this relationship. It fascinated her. How one so powerful, like Anakin, could just be controlled like a slave on a leash. She chuckled. He was a slave on a leash. His master stood behind him, demanding that he bring justice to their perfect little galaxy. Anakin bit his lip as he watched Abeloth remove her hands from the necks of Anakin's children. Anakin used the Force and threw Abeloth back into the tree behind her, demanding that the children run towards him. They did, as Abeloth screamed out a terrifying scream, ear-piercing and full of resentment and evil as she roared like a beast. She pushed back on Anakin, and he tumbled back a little, and then he caught his balance as Luke and Leia ran behind their father, watching him stare down the creature. She stepped forward gently, even a little suggestively, as she grinned at Anakin. She told Anakin that he would always be a slave, as she tried to push him over the edge, trying to break the little bit of balance he had. Anakin steadied himself, without the help of anybody else. Seeing his children safe was all he needed. He closed his eyes and focused as she continued forward. She then spoke. Then if she had to lose 3 who she cared about, then so would Anakin. She had the first in Ahsoka, and then Kenobi and Yoda were ripped from the ground and pulled in front of her. She looked at Anakin with a sinister smile. She gripped her hands around both of their necks and asked if they would be sacrificed. She gripped her hands around both of their necks and asked if he would sacrifice those who he knew longer for his own children. Anakin demanded that she let go as he stepped forward to face her. A blast of red electricity emanated from her hands as Anakin was struck by it and pulled to the ground, making him kneel before her. She let go of Obi-Wan and Yoda as she walked up and got next to Anakin's face, as she gently placed her hand on it and whispered in his ear like a lover, as she said that once everyone he cared about died, then she had her permission to kill her. Anakin cried out as he tried to move. She lashed onto him with the Force as she grabbed his soul and pulled on it, as she tried to remove Anakin Skywalker from his body, as Luke and Leia ran up and grabbed their father, keeping him away from Abeloth's power. She felt the surge of power as she fell back. She powdered her face, and her eyebrows shot down to her nose as she turned around and ripped Obi-Wan's Force from him, and then ripped Yoda's from him. Both Yoda and Obi-Wan toppled back, unable to use the Force for the first time in their lives. It wasn't too much power, but it was more power for Abeloth to use against Skywalker. She smiled as Anakin tried to stand up against her might. She then watched as Obi-Wan and Yoda twitched without being able to use the Force. They couldn't do anything. They were defenseless. She then pulled them up into the air with the Force as Anakin regained his footing and reached out with his hands, trying to stop her. But as soon as he rose his arms, Yoda and Obi-Wan's necks were snapped, and their lifeless bodies thrown to either side of the field. Abeloth smiled at Anakin as she stood face to face with Skywalker. She pushed him further, and now she would kill Luke and Leia. Anakin's rage bellowed from within him as he reached out and raised her into the air in the middle of the arena. Anakin raised her over the symbolic balance the father once held so dear. Anakin then used the Force to create the apparitions of her family so that she could see them ripped away from her once more. Anakin pulled her down to her knees as the arena began to ignite with light brighter than that of the sun, and it began spinning around rapidly. Abeloth's eyes opened as she realized that Anakin truly was the chosen one, unable to be beaten by anybody. The apparitions of the son, the daughter, and the father all raised their hands as they began pulling her apart. She had no control, no power, but her family was the one to banish her yet again. Anakin stared into Abeloth's soul, her eyes, as he grinned at her, as terror crawled over her body as she was ripped apart, her Force essence being sucked into the ground, and her death being crowned by the power of the Force. She screeched out in terrible pain as Anakin ripped her apart and killed Abeloth, removing the darkness from the galaxy as he fell to his knees. He looked up, and it was done. He killed her, stopping her evil from crowding the galaxy. Anakin looked over as a tear from his right eye fell for Kenobi, and looked to his left as a tear from his left eye fell for Yoda. Luke and Leia wrapped their arms around their father, as Anakin embraced both of them. He held them tight in his arms as he told them that everything would be okay. Anakin would eventually get the children and the bodies of the fallen Jedi Masters back inside the shuttle as he took the children back to Coruscant. Anakin spent the entire trip holding his children, keeping his composure in front of them. He felt so terrible about losing Obi-Wan and Yoda. They were the original people in the Jedi Order who cared about him and made sure he was always okay. Yoda was a bit hard in the beginning, but over time, he made it ever apparent that he did care about Skywalker. Anakin reflected. There was so much to think about as he eventually returned to Coruscant. Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and Yoda would be buried on the same day. 2 Masters of the High Council gone. Anakin buried the 2 Jedi Masters and his former apprentice. Padme would take Luke and Leia back to Naboo while Anakin remembered those who he lost, while the Council had no clue that the children were his. After the funerals, Anakin would address the Council, telling them that balance had been brought to the Force. The galaxy could finally heal. The Council asked what he had learned. Anakin thought about something Yoda once told him. He knew that while the Jedi were purists, they needed to learn from their failures, and they needed to learn to trust the true essence of balance. Anakin smiled. Yoda would always be remembered, because the Jedi had to pass on everything they learned, not just to themselves, but throughout the galaxy. The Jedi needed to inspire, not just protect, burden themselves with teaching rather than safeguarding. The Jedi had the opportunity to learn from the passing of Yoda and Kenobi. Anakin would remain in the Order, as the eldest member on the Council, Plo Koon, would become the Grand Master. Anakin would raise his children, unlike the ones. The children would become great users of the Force, not as Jedi, but as Skywalkers. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to George Story, Benjamin Wells, Jay Hoppin, Warping, Thread, Icy Raptor, Gord, and Chancellor Los Angeles for supporting the channel. Let's see 1,000 likes on this so that we can see what if Revan trained Anakin Skywalker. I know you guys have been asking for this for the longest time, and it's finally here. If you want to see a what if, let me know down below. Every now it comes from dual crossovers, and check out the Twitch community, Discord, and Patreon to be part of the community. Support in other ways. And if you want to learn how to win a free lightsaber, well, you go down below, there's a doc link, you click on the doc, you put your name down below. We're doing a giveaway for 3 or 5 lightsabers when I hit 50,000 subscribers. We're almost there, so hit the subscribe button, share, like, do all the things, let's pump these videos up. Got a bunch of great videos coming out this month, and I really want you guys to enjoy them, and I want to bring a great amount of entertainment to the Star Wars community while we're waiting for the Andor show or whatever show comes out next to come out. Until then, though, let's talk about this story and talk about what kind of happened here. So, obviously, this has been done several times before. I know it's been done, and it's one of the older things that theory has done, and I do know that off the top of my head. It's like 5 years old or something like that. And I haven't watched that one. I'm gonna be honest. I looked it up to see if anyone had done it before, and it turns out people have done it. But as per tradition, I don't want to do something you've seen before. Everyone's gonna do the same thing. Yeah, sure. Anakin granted the rank of Master. Well, I decided to change it up. Instead of him being given the rank of Master while in that session, I decided, well, what if the Council tricked him? What if the Council said, "You're not a Master yet, but if you go do this thing, then we'll give it to you. But we won't tell you that we're gonna do it if you do it." Because if the Jedi were smart, and they assumed, and I'm going to assume in this situation that they are, because it is a what if, it's literally in the title, that they're going to give Anakin the rank of Master if he goes undercover, right? It pushes Anakin to believe that the Jedi are trying to betray him, and the Jedi secretly know that he's going to go and talk to the Chancellor, because they're close. When he finds out that the Chancellor is actually evil, and he comes back and tells the Jedi are like, yeah, you're actually a Master, by the way, have fun. You know, it's not as detrimental to him as you would think, and I think that Anakin would still go out and talk to Palpatine the same way he did because it happened in canon already. And I'm not really playing with fire too much by letting it kind of boil over. Let Anakin kind of like spend that time, that extra couple days or a couple hours, or I forget how long the time period is between Grievous and the death of Grievous and when Anakin is granted ranking on the High Council. I don't know how long, I think it's about a day, but over that time he has time to think about it, he has time to have his nightmares, right? And when he finally interacts with Sidious and he finds out about these true power, the dark side, the story of Darth Plagueis, he's going to be like, oh my goodness, this guy's actually like a Sith. And then the Jedi are going to be like, yeah, actually you're a Master. You can access a restricted code. And he's going to be so enthralled with that, he's going to go there. And the idea behind this is that he would go to the Sith section because he talked to Palpatine, and Palpatine said, well, Plagueis knew of how immortality worked. So he would go to the Sith section of the restricted archives. I don't know if that's in there, but I made it up for the purpose of the story. And I decided, well, if he doesn't see immortality in the Sith texts, Sith holocrons or whatnot, he's going to be like, wait, I was lied to. And then it would all click in his mind. And he would realize that Sidious was actually behind everything. Sidious tried to have Padme killed, and literally everything would just kind of click for him, right? Now, obviously the rest of the story is kind of the rest of the story and what you expect. But I didn't want it to end there. Now, this wasn't me trying to draw out the length of the story, but I decided I want to do something unique. I know you guys like Legends, and I know Legends is popular for half the community of Star Wars, so I decided to bring back someone that we all know as Abeloth. And I thought she would be a great villain, because in my mind I was like, well, let's try and make it interesting. Let's make it so that she has a reason to be going after Anakin. Not just any reason, like, it wouldn't make sense if Plagueis went after Anakin, for example, or Snoke. And they were originally in the story. I was going to originally do Snoke or Plagueis or somebody like that, because I wanted some character to be coming back to be that evil. And then I thought, well, what if Abeloth came back to try and kill Anakin for killing the ones? Well, he didn't technically kill them, but technically. So I decided that Abeloth would be our villain. Her motivation is revenge. That's a perfect motivation for a villain. It's kind of basic, out of the basic like villain motivation handbook, but you know, I wanted her to have a motivation, and I wanted it to be driven by something. It doesn't make it fun if Plagueis is just like, I want to kill Anakin because he's Anakin. It's like, okay, why though? Why? If Plagueis was smart, he would wait and try and kill all the Jedi, or wait till Anakin died or something. You know, died of natural causes. Instead, we have Abeloth saying, okay, well, I'm gonna kill your children, just like you killed mine, essentially. Even though she was a servant and all that stuff, I do know all the stuff about Abeloth. I did all my research for it, but, you know, she was technically the mother in this situation. So I kind of flipped the script where Anakin is the father, and yeah, so essentially Anakin had to save his children, and, you know, that was the whole purpose of that. So anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this. I always want to try and do something different, so I hope I stuck out in the crowd and given you a story that you guys all got to enjoy. Regardless though, I love you all. Spread the love, my friends. Subscribe, share, do all the things, and always remember, may the Force be with you.